Go. Welcome to the Fuse podcast, the podcast for those in the PR and comms industry. And this week we're joined by Will and David from Pangolin. And in today's conversation, we talk a little bit about Danny Dyer and Tom Daly, how earned media has evolved, and we dig into what makes a great creative idea for earned and the opportunity for smaller agencies in the age of AI. Enjoy. Thank you, Will. Thank you, David. I would love to kick off by hearing you guys tell us a little bit about you, your roles, and Pangolin. Is it Pangolin or Pangolin?
Pangolin, nailed it the first time.
Hey, perfect.
So I'm Will Cookson, one of the co-founders at Pangolin. We've been going for around 10, 11 years. And I'm the co-founder, but also ECD. I've kind of evolved over the years to become a bit more of a ECD, focusing on everything from a creative standpoint that goes out the business, but also focus more on sort of the tomorrow of the business, whereas Dave is more in the day-to-day of today.
Yes. Hello, I'm David Phillips. I'm today. I'm kind of got more of a CEO role. So I'm more in charge of the day-to-day running of the business, the finance side of things, all things HR and people, capacity, all the fun stuff.
Nice. And so you've been in business for quite a while now. And I remember when I first started off in PR, when we talked about PR, it was really print, radio, TV, maybe a little bit of live or experiential. You've got a view about what earned media is now and how it's changed, and I would love to hear some of the stories about what brought you to that realization and what's your view of this now.
Yeah, I think, PR and the definition of PR and earned, as a saying, it has evolved a hell of a lot, I'd say, in the last 10 years or so, since we started, really. If you look at the way in which the media landscape's changed, the way in which people are consuming media, there's been a huge shift. And I actually think the PR industry has been brilliant at adapting to that shift, evolving with that. And I think that, PR and earned first agencies are more important than ever. And I think it's just making sure that you're bringing your clients on that journey as well. And I think some clients have definitely come along on that journey with us, particularly the ones that specialize in PR or comms, who we work directly into. However, there are others, obviously, where they don't have like a dedicated PR person necessarily. So you're often feeding into someone from the brand team who's, spinning a lot of plates all at once, so isn't necessarily keeping up to date with exactly how PR's kind of evolved over the years. And I think it's our responsibility, along with the rest of the agency mix, to kind of educate them on that. It's not just PR that's changed in that world, the advertising world, the paid world, like everything's changed and is changing at a rapid pace. And I think it's our responsibility to make sure that you're bringing them on that journey and making sure that they have like a clear understanding of what earned is. Because actually, fundamentally, when I think about our client mix, a lot of our kind of direct contact clients who are on the brand side are the ones that hold the budget. So you kind of need to show and demonstrate to them how powerful earned is and what an important role that it plays in the marketing mix. And by and large, we've been able to do that over the years. I think the proof is in the pudding. So as soon as you get a really strong piece of work away where you can prove some brilliant results from an earned point of view and the impact that those results have had on the business, which I think we'll probably come on to, that's when they start to open their eyes to it. There are definitely some grey areas when it comes to the likes of managing influencers, for instance, or creating content, which may primarily sit across socials, but can also be used from a bit more of a traditional point of view. There's always a bit of tug of war, I think, between agencies trying to get hold of that. A lot of clients that we work with, particularly the larger global clients, we work with an agency mix. So there's normally a social agency in the mix. There's normally a paid agency in the mix. and we're pretty good at understanding each other's roles. But there's definitely been some instances in the past where you kind of need to stand your ground and make sure that you're not getting pushed around by another one of those agencies.
No
And I think
problem.
that's helped. That's helped by the fact that, PR agencies feel like we're on a bit more of a level playing field at the moment, and we're at the table with the ad agencies, paid agencies, right from the beginning, which 10 or 15 years ago wasn't always the case. So it's great to see.
Yeah, I remember being in those interagency meetings about 10 years ago, and you get the creative agency pitching their big idea, and you go, oh, okay, I can do something with that. Then all of a sudden they're pitching, oh, but this is how it comes alive in PR, and this is how it comes alive in social, and we've already got some influence suggestions for you right here. And you're
Yeah,
thinking, wait a minute,
yeah.
what's going on here then?
Here's a slide with the front page of a newspaper with a headline mocked up with the client in it. Yeah, for sure. But I think, as well as educating clients, I think other agencies are getting a better understanding about, people's specialities and having an appreciation for what and first agencies can do. And to be honest, I'd love to give you some juicy gossip about an agency we've worked with recently who's been absolutely terrible. But the most recent ones we've worked with, we worked some great agencies on Malibu, for instance. They've been so supportive of our work and vice versa.
Yeah.
And I think there's really some mutual respect between the two agencies there, which is great to see. So the more we can experience that, the better, I think.
And what's your view on where something like influencers would sit? Because I do find that there's a bit of a blurring of lines between media and creative and earned stroke PR here. Is there a natural home in your view?
It's a good question. I think it depends. It very much depends on the brand and the agency mix to begin with, to be honest. If there's a social first agency in the mix, then quite often influencers would sit with them, particularly from a paid point of view. If we're looking to gift some influencers, but possibly not in a paid capacity, and we're looking for kind of creative ways in which we can ask them to do that, then I think PR and earned agencies should have a good say as well. So I think it really is quite dependent on the brief and what other agencies are in the mix. And yeah, it all tends to come out in the wash, I'd say, in the end. Like, agreements get in place between the agencies, and you can kind of take it from there. Like at Pangolin, we've got a specialist social team. So we've got a team of 3 or 4 people who day in, day out deal with influencers and contracting them both on a paid and earned point of view. And they work with a hell of a lot of our clients, but they certainly don't work with all of them, because some of them have specific separate agencies that deal with that, and would quite often deal with that across a number of brands with our clients. So yeah, I think it's just understanding your lane when you're getting briefed by a client and trying to stick to it as much as possible.
And you've got a really interesting view around how earned media has evolved. And last time we spoke, you were talking about this model. Could you tell us a bit more about this and explain your view of what earned is now?
Yeah, absolutely. I can probably give David a break as he sips of water. So yeah, I think, as you talked about at the top of the call, the journey that PR and earned media has been going on, the days of sort of traditional linear PR are kind of long gone, right? We all know that, and it's evolved into something much, much bigger than that. And ultimately, the best campaigns we know are ones that have the raw momentum going across multiple channels, and it really engages the full marketing mix. So something that we've been working on here is just redefining what we're calling the modern earned ecosystem. So really thinking about what does the modern earned campaign look like, and really what we're called Pangolin. So amazingly, they're P's, but really we've built a model focused around the 4 P's. And we use this as a bit of a planning model when we're getting to our campaign. So I'll walk you through those really quickly just to unpack that. So first one, and the first P, is publishers, is what you talked about at the beginning of the call, Adrian. So yeah, the traditional publications and publishers that we're working with in a day-to-day basis. And it's a really important part of PR, obviously speaking to journalists and looking at whether it's traditional print, online, broadcast, whatever it could be, they're still massively influential and a really, really important part of the bread and butter of what we do in PR. And importantly, that is going to remain that. If you look at where AI is pulling all of its information from, earned is heavily upweighted in terms of where that AI is pulling that information from. So we're only going to see an increase from clients coming to us saying, look, we're really doubling down on earned. We need to make sure our news is not just gone through from a pay perspective. We're pushing out our stories in earned channels so that we're showing up through AI search for consumers. So that's really, really important. But that's really only one part of what PR has become and what earned's become. So the other sort of 3 Ps we talk about is, one is people of influence. Again, you and David were just talking that through. So really those thought leaders, the taste shapers who are helping sharing their opinions and getting people noticed. So whether that's journalists, which are of course important, influencers, like you were talking about, whether that's celebrities, of course, in PR, we all work with a lot of different type of talent, but celebrities is really important. Or it could just be thought leaders in their own field. So again, we know they have historically played a really important role, but really understand where people of influence fit within a campaign. And that really, ultimately you can work with a person of influence or a really high profile influencer now that actually off the back of what they do can bleed into traditional earned coverage. So a story really can come from anywhere. So we really think about, of course, publishers, but then thinking about people of influence when we're coming into our campaigns. And then the final 2 Ps that we think about is platform, which sounds like an obvious one, but the really big, powerful platforms now that are not just traditional publishers, but whether they are video publishers, of course, social networks, but also podcasts, huge, massive, powerful engine now in terms of a different platform and a different way that information is being shared. So when we start to think about our campaigns, again, thinking about the platform, where is it going to sit? What type of content could we be packaging up that's going to be relevant for podcasts? Ultimately, podcasts have become a huge weekly thing that a massive swathe of the UK and globally, the way in which people are getting their news and information. But quite often people are forgetting about that from a traditional earned perspective when it comes to coverage, right? Or an actual campaign. So how are we baking these platforms into our earned thinking and our traditional PR campaigns? And then the final one is the sort of holy grail P for us, which is peers. So really, this is about brand fans, right? So sharing your stories. Who's your consumer at the end of the day that's really going to be sharing and caring about the news? So this could be getting into people's WhatsApp group chats, which is the holy grail. We know that's really hard to measure, and I'm sure we can talk through that in more detail. But community groups, word of mouth, openly the hardest part, but the most important part is getting the consumer to change their action, right? Or take notice of what you're doing. And importantly, with that, an individual consumer or customer now has a bigger voice than ever, right? They've all got social media channels. So again, thinking about how can we really bake in peers and think about, okay, when we're coming up with a campaign, what content are we giving to them? How are we giving them a voice to help spread the word for us? So just creating a hero piece of content for a campaign is fine, but actually nowadays, modern consumers, they want different video or imagery or whatever it might be in different formats that we need to think about multiple channels. So when you unpack that, the old school traditional, it's PR 101, it's trying to get into publishers, we've moved on a long, long way from that. So what we look at is 4P model and start to think about that when we're planning our campaigns, to making sure it feels like a proper ecosystem and we're touching as much of that as possible.
I love that. I love the idea that people of influence have evolved from before. I think that goes with, you're talking about journalists becoming our people of influence, but quite a lot of journalists are creating their own personal brands as well, and quite a decent social following.
Yeah.
And you talk about how some stories start with people of influence, but then infiltrate the media as well. Have you got any examples of that?
It's a good one, isn't it? What we were looking at when actually talking earlier today with the team is just around Substack, right? Which is, again, we look at the last year, 2 years, that's a whole new platform which is emerging. And again, it's at I would say the earlier stage of what role that's playing again in traditional PR campaigns. So again, that's just another platform we need to be thinking about, with people having their own channels, their own voice, and monetizing that if they want to. So in terms of those exact examples of traditional influencer voices that have bled into other campaigns. I mean, a good one that we work with quite a lot, we work on the Frank's Flagger campaign. So we do a huge amount of work with Frank's Red Hot Sauce, always fun. Everyone loves working on a hot sauce brand. And we've used a lot of people of influence to help really generate momentum behind our campaign. So we've partnered over the last 2 campaigns. He's become a bit of an unofficial brand ambassador, which is the good old Danny Dyer, who's fronted both of our campaigns, one being Flagger, which is getting a hot sauce and a lager. And then our recent one with him is we announced him as the Codfather, because we were getting Frank's hot sauce in the batter for the fish and chips. And I think a lot of what we've done has been very social first with the way in which we've worked with him. So, of course, he's well known in the UK, but what we've looked to do is actually use his channels, create content with him, and a number of different cut downs of the different hero films that we might be producing alongside a whole swathe of imagery. But then we're using his channel ultimately to tease and push that out. And off the back of that, we're getting traditional coverage. So he's been a really good example of the role of influence.
Yeah, and I think actually the most recent campaign that we did with Danny with fish and chip shops, we placed an interview with Danny with the Evening Standard that they filmed on site in a fish and chip shop, and in that interview they put to Danny Dyer that I think Ed Sheeran had said that you can't get a decent fish and chips in London because you're too far away from the sea. And so they kind of asked Danny about that directly, and Danny was like, of course you can, like there's some great fish and chippies in the local area. And then actually him and Ed Sheeran and Danny Dyer then had a bit of back and forth on social media about it. I think like there was chat about them going to the Ipswich West Ham game, so Ed could host Danny there. So actually that's just quite a nice example of off the back of actually a traditional media placement. It leaked into online. We had, 2 massive people of influence. Ed Sheeran, particularly, I don't know what his following is, but I imagine it's gigantic.
It's pretty large.
Having this chat, and don't get me wrong, Frank's wasn't front and center, but it definitely came up, and that was like really lovely to see. Really lovely to see that come to life.
And I'd say the other sort of final point to add on that is, again, with the way in which that brands are operating now, right? That you talked about the top of the role of agencies. I think some of the best, most agile PR campaigns at the moment that you've seen over the last even 5 years or so is the social media team, or people having an ear to the ground of what is happening in terms of their audience and fans. And for example, we work a lot in food and drink, people putting forward odd, random recommendations of flavors and combinations and ideas for your brand. The social team elevating that, responding to it, creating it, can often then actually then take that from social and now bleed into traditional. It's turning up on the Metro or the Evening Standard and traditional titles. Sometimes it hits broadcast. So it's just really interesting for us now, not thinking about PR and traditional stuff in your silo. Ultimately, it can come from anywhere. And that, when we talk about people of influence, that can come from one random customer who shared a slightly quirky idea that you then turn into your own marketing campaign.
I love that. And the last point you mentioned within the 4 Ps was peers. So when you're talking about, I guess with that you're talking about, so you mentioned WhatsApp groups and getting into community.
Yeah.
Can you give some examples of how you've adapted a campaign or worked for a campaign in that field, and in particular how you've approached measurement around it? Because I imagine that's quite difficult.
Yeah. Probably we can keep talking about good old Frank's Red Hot, because it's a good example of something that we really focused on for that. So as I mentioned, there were 2 campaigns. The first one was Flagger, which was getting your red hot into your pre-match lager for the Euros, which was a bit of a Euros hijack campaign. And then we followed that up with the Codfather, which was the fish and chip sort of extension of that. So really, the core goal of that, bluntly, was we needed to focus on getting the individual to try and for them to try Frank's out for themselves, right? That was the goal of the campaign. At its core is we wanted to get Frank's in more people's hands. So yes, as we mentioned, we used Danny and influencers as well. We really used influencers to sort of lead the charge, inspire people to try both recipes. And as a result of doing that, we saw initially some really good content of people going out, trying it for themselves, either making a Flagger at home, posting Flagger, making of videos on YouTube, and all that sort of stuff that we would track. We also saw people asking their local chippies and tagging their local chippy in to ask them to try the batter out for themselves. So that was great. I think we also, for Codfather, tapped into local Facebook community groups where we knew there was some really well-known and well-respected fish and chippies. So tagging those guys in and trying to get those really small-scale, tactical, local Facebook groups involved to drive up the word of mouth has been really, really impactful. I think, to your point about measurement, peers of the 4 Ps that we work with is often the hardest, right? It's the slight dark arts. Like we all know, and we all work in PR. So when you eventually get a WhatsApp coming through from a friend of a friend who doesn't luckily work in marketing, but they're going, "Oh my God, your campaign's just popped up in my mate's WhatsApp feed," you know you're on the right track. But obviously that anecdotally to clients is only a one-off. So I think the couple of things that we do at our agency on the peers front is, one, as you'd expect, we're using social monitoring tools, right? Just to track consumer engagement, the conversation, tracking organic content that's being posted, seeing what language and messages are actually getting cut through is one really important thing. So that's good. So we can show that, as we mentioned, the audience is engaging with it. From a WhatsApp perspective, which is the holy grail, like how do we break into WhatsApp chats? It is really hard, right? It's dark social. We can track specific URLs being opened through WhatsApp in terms of linking, but ultimately, naturally, the way that WhatsApp will tend to work is people are just forwarding on content or watching a video. So that's a bit harder to track. So really, actually, the interesting thing for us is let's look at consumer impact in terms of sale. So it's the other thing we're looking at, right? So a slightly more purist commercial lens on the work that we're doing. So we worked really closely with the McCormick team who own Frank's Hot Sauce and say, is there a way that we can track commercial sales based on our campaigns? And brilliantly, a really good piece of content that we got back from our client was off the back of Flagger. We knew that the Flagger campaign with Danny was the only piece of proactive marketing they were doing. That was the only place they were putting spend behind it. And off the back of that, we saw an 18% uplift in sales for the month of July without any other marketing going on. So in terms of the peer-to-peer and actual impact we're having, it just shows it was doing the right thing, right? Which is fantastic. And then I suppose the final piece of the peer evaluation model is also, and it's only going to accelerate thanks to AI. We're getting way better at tracking consumer sentiment before and post campaigns. So obviously the old, what impact are we having on the brand trackers, and that happening every 6 months with big brands is hard to track. But what we can as an industry get way better at is let's track consumer understanding and sentiment and feeling around a campaign before a launch. And then we can really quickly rip through some survey data and research to see, has that made an impact at the other side of a campaign? So we did that for Don't Drink and Dive with Malibu. So we did a consumer piece of research around their understanding of dangers around water and alcohol before the campaign launched. And then we also ran it about, I think it was 8 or 12 weeks later, they did a follow-up piece. And the researcher was brilliant, right? 2.9 million consumers in the UK said they would, or they're well more aware of drink and diving and said they wouldn't drink and dive again. So again, with all of that piece together, if you're looking at social, also tracking sales uplift, really drilling down into community groups, checking what content people are actually producing, we're starting to unpack that actual peer and seeing how we can measure it.
And I love how behind you, you've got pictures of these people who starred in your campaigns as well. I remember
it was totally by accident, Adrian, I promise. Totally.
Yeah. And I remember seeing that work and being blown away by how brilliant it was. Some fantastic work coming out of the agency. And clearly you're very, very good at coming up with creative ideas and coming up with good campaigns and execution. When we last spoke, you had some very strong views on what successful creative work is shaped by. Two things, simplicity and provocation. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Sure. I realise I've done a lot of talking, but David, I'm sure we'll jump in on this one. This has just come from, look, I've been in the industry for nearly 20 years, probably. We've run the agency for 10, 11. And I think what I've always been quite hard on when we're coming with creative ideas is just focusing bluntly around the belief that simplicity beats complexity. I think we work in an industry which ultimately we're in marketing, right? And a lot of the time we're working for consumer or FMCG brands. We're not trying to send a rocket to Mars. So a lot of the time we just need to focus on what we're doing. We're also realistically targeting consumers who are unbelievably inundated with thousands and thousands of pieces of brand content, not even just paid content, but you look at how much agency work gets churned out just in the UK and the stuff that we see, it's relentless. So I think more and more for us, what really our skill is and what we pride ourselves on doing is taking actually quite complicated briefs from clients a lot of the time and sort of wading through the brand language and really taking that and turning it into something memorably simple. I really believe that we need to keep things really, really simple. So for us, what we sort of focus about when we're getting a brief through the door is what is provocative behind the idea, and then how can we keep the idea at its core as simple as we possibly can. So, provocative in its own right, ultimately we're trying to attempt to cause a reaction. We have to do that in what we're doing day to day now, right? We need to make sure our ideas feel like they've got a bit of edge to them. Anything a little bit bland or beige, bluntly, is just going to get lost in the ether. So I think a lot of the time what we're trying to do is really think about what's the edge, what's the idea that's we're rubbing up against, what is it, what's the cultural tension or consumer insight that we're going to push up against. So when we were coming up with things, we can talk some of our, I'd say, more provocative ideas. They've always got a bit of edge to them, and I think that's something we really focus on, so making sure that's there. And then simplicity ultimately is the age-old thing of, we're in marketing, we're in comms. Could you sit with your mate in the pub or in a coffee shop or call your gran and explain the idea of what you've done to them very, very quickly? And if you can't, ultimately, I'm like, how would a consumer or our customer how can we expect them to ever understand it? So, I haven't done it that much over the years, but I strongly think some of the best ideas we've ever come up with, I could have put on one slide with a picture with 7 words, and that could have been my pitch deck.
Yeah.
Don't need 95 slides. I could have literally just come up with one slide, visual, bit of copy. And if the client and the team can't get behind that, you're going to struggle to land an idea in consumer mindset, I think, nowadays.
I love that. And I love the idea that you need to provoke a reaction. Can you give us an example of some work that you've done which has been challenging?
I'll give you a break.
Yeah.
Shall I? Yeah, I think the one that stands out for me is a few years old now, but it was a campaign that we did for the Glenlivet, the Scotch single malt whiskey brand. They came to us with a really wide brief, actually, which sometimes are the hardest. And I don't think this idea came back to them on the first response. But they basically, they have this sort of like brand saying of original by tradition. That's kind of what they live their life by. They live their brand by. The founder was kind of like quite a challenging founder, like went against the grain, so to speak, back in the day when the Glenlivet was first founded. And they basically came to us and said, look, how can we bring this original by tradition message into the modern world? Like, what can we do which can feel like really original for a whiskey brand, particularly a sort of like Scotch brand who are quite traditional in their heart. And essentially, we came up with these whiskey capsules. So we took inspiration from, I think it was around the time of the London Marathon. And there was a sustainable packaging company there called Nopla who created these capsules made out of seaweed, which they're handing out to runners at the London Marathon, and they had water inside, so people were able to consume water pretty quickly and easily. I don't know if you've tried kind of like trying to drink from a water bottle while running, but I'm certainly not good at it. So we thought it was a really great idea, and then took inspiration from that and thought, well, hang on, if they can hold water, then they could probably hold alcohol. Why don't we actually challenge the way in which whiskey drinkers consume the drink? Like, let's mix it up a bit. So we put whiskey cocktails into these capsules. They're fairly sizable, and hosting an event at like a bar just down the road in Old Street, Thayer Elementary, which is an amazing bar. Check it out if you haven't. And we launched it. It was a pretty standard media night. We got some really nice media to come along, and essentially everyone was trying these capsule cocktails. And we got a couple of nice pieces off the back of it. And a few days later, it started to really gain some traction, like particularly on Twitter at the time. And it caused a bit of a stir. I think a lot of the Glenlivet's kind of like loyal customer base were quite traditional when it came to how they consumed the whiskey, particularly if it's a single malt Scotch. So yeah, they were pretty annoyed. They didn't love the fact that we'd kind of put it into this capsule that you kind of pop in your mouth and it kind of bursts in your mouth. They didn't like it very much. So it caused a bit of a stir in the UK that then went across the pond to the US. And it really kind of took off over there. There's a lot of people with very strong feelings when it comes to whiskey. And it appeared on, James Corden's show, Ellen DeGeneres' show. And yeah, there were definitely times where we had to kind of ride the wave a little bit, I think. Like there were times when our client was quite nervous. They were nervous that they had kind of alienated like a large part of their customer base. But we kind of, credit to them, actually, they rode the wave and appreciated that this conversation and this debate was exactly what they wanted to achieve. And I don't think like long term, they certainly didn't put anyone off the Glenlivet. And actually, I can't remember the exact figures, but it was over 200% increase in traffic to the website. And then the actual capsules, which we made, they ended up refining them a little bit, but they, up until about a year ago, they were still in circulation, being served at various Glenlivet events across the world. They opened a brand home up in Scotland, and you could get the serves there as well. So it's something that the brand actually held on to for a long time. But essentially it came out of a very simple idea, definitely had its provocative edge to it, which upset a few people, but that really sort of like charged the conversation. It's probably the most memorable one we've worked on for sure.
Brilliant.
And a really great learning for PR agencies, which is maybe where the advertising agencies are a bit more commercially savvy, is just thinking, hold on, if we've got an idea that suddenly has legs and lives years beyond what we thought it was going to, how do we bake ourselves into that commercialization of ideas? So it was just a really interesting learning for us and for a lot of agencies to think about.
Definitely. And I love how the tension that you identified was really the power behind getting onto TV in America. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it was great.
Exactly.
And the other side of what you talked about there with provocation is simplicity. Now, sometimes when I see some campaigns, there's a campaign structure which we talked about previously, the catch and drop, which is a two-parter campaign where an agency or brand puts something out in the world and it creates a bit of a stir, and then there's a reveal part of it, which is, it's a bit of a trick all along. This is the real campaign. And to my mind, I feel like these campaigns challenge the simplicity part. But I don't know, you might have a different view, but I'd love to know what you think of those types of campaigns.
Yeah, I think there's definitely like good and bad examples of them. Like I think we haven't got that many examples of a catch and drop campaign. Like in the past, we did one with Doritos a good few years ago now, where they were sponsoring a music festival in the UK called Strawberries and Cream. So we just posted out on their socials a few days before that announcement came out, a strawberries and cream flavored Dorito, which actually, again, it's one of those, like there's a lot of people around the world feel quite strongly about their Doritos and the various different flavors.
We knew that.
We did know that. And, it caused a lot of debate, people talking about whether they'd try it or not, whether they'd like it or not. And actually, it's quite a nice example because we're talking at a time of Wimbledon where M&S and I think Subway maybe have released a strawberries and cream sandwich, which has caused a lot of chat as well, which has been great to see. Actually, I've really enjoyed those campaigns. but yeah, that was, so we kind of announced or dropped this flavor on their socials, and then a few days later announced the fact that actually it wasn't this new flavor. It was the fact that they're sponsoring this music festival and they've got some tickets to give away. Now, I think we definitely generated more chat and coverage in the first part of that drop, I would say, but it gave us a bit more of an angle to then talk about a bit more of a straightforward story that Doritos was sponsoring Strawberries and Cream Festival. So we thought it was a nice creative way to get the news out there. I don't think they always work, but if that core idea is simple enough, it can be. I think, the key things are simple idea one, the timing of it, like don't leave it weeks and weeks and weeks, because especially in today's world, consumers are consuming so much from a media point of view that it would be forgotten about. So making sure that timing's there. And then, making sure that actually you're still going to get a second bite of the cherry with that second piece of news. That first piece is normally more provocative, but making sure that there's still enough in that second piece of news to get people talking still, which is easier said than done. Yeah, exactly.
The payoff is the hardest bit, I think, with those, right? That the first piece can be really provocative and get everyone talking and hyped up, but making sure that the brand gets the payoff at the end, I think, can be the challenging part with it, and consumers putting two and two together and not just thinking Doritos has made a fake flavor of chips. Actually, it's because we've got an on-pack promotion running. So, yeah, you've got to make sure the provocation at the beginning is in parallel with the payoff.
Yeah, I love it. I could chat to you guys about creativity forever. It's a fascinating topic. But I also want to chat to you about your view on the impact of AI on the industry, because I think you are probably doing what a lot of people should be doing in this field and having a good look at it under the hood of the agency model. So tell us what you guys have got going on, and tell us what you've discovered so far.
Yeah, so I think it's fair to say that we're embracing AI at the moment. I took a bit of convincing because I was pretty scared of it for a period of time, I'd say.
I love it.
Yeah, you do. But I'm embracing it now as well. I think, as I said at the start of this podcast, I think that the PR as an industry has always evolved and has always adapted to the modern world. And I think this is another example of how it can adapt to the modern world. So I'm actually really excited about it. I'm really excited to see what other agencies are doing. Like I've already seen, actually, I've attended a couple of conferences recently with other agencies presenting what they've done. And it's really exciting. And I think it's a really good opportunity for the industry to kind of come together and show how brilliant it is and embrace this new technology and kind of push the industry forward. In terms of what we're doing, I think at the moment we're kind of working with two different advisors. We're looking at AI in two different ways, essentially. The first way is by looking at how we run the agency internally. So it's kind of more my cup of tea, I suppose, when you look at our roles. How we run the agency internally, what are those kind of clever tools that can be built through AI, or just simple AI tools that the team can be using on a day-to-day basis to make jobs easier, to make jobs quicker, to drive those sort of like time efficiencies within the agency for us and for our clients as well. So that's sort of like one way in which we're sort of like really, really looking at that. And then we've got another advisor on board who is essentially, they've come in and they've basically assessed every part of the business. So they've interviewed both myself and Will, they've interviewed the senior team, they've sent out a questionnaire to the rest of the team to look at what we're doing on a day-to-day basis and how they can like build those systems which are really going to help. And then the extra part is upskilling our workforce and making sure that they're trained in AI and trained to use it the best way possible. Not to be scared of it, but to really embrace it and make the most of the technology that's available to us there, because it is here to stick around. I'm not of the view that it's gonna replace people in our agency, but I am of the view that we need to become literate at it, because otherwise we will get left behind as an agency. So yeah, I'm now at a point where I feel like we're embracing it, and I'm ready to embrace it, and I'm kind of happy. I'm happy that we're there, I would say. And I think, like, when I look at us as an agency, we're an independent agency. Like, Will and I both own 50%. We've got a fairly small leadership team. We have a couple of like external advisors outside of AI that help as well. But I think we're in a really strong position to adapt to the ever-changing world of AI and adapt quickly and learn quickly. And that's why, we've brought these advisors on board to really help us do that. And I think that actually, it kind of shows there's sort of strength in those smaller agencies. Like, we're just hovering around 30 people at the moment, and we can make decisions quickly and we can adapt quickly. And I think that's a massive superpower of us as a small agency. So again, like, I'd call on fellow small agencies to sort of like support each other in doing that. I've already spoken to like a fair few leaders of a similar independent size to us, who are embracing it in a similar way. And I think this is a really good opportunity for us to shine as smaller agencies, show that adaptation and how it can happen really, really quickly, and sort of bring our clients on that journey as well.
I love that. Brilliant.
And the only thing I'd add to it, right, is the more you look into AI, I've been using AI for a while. I love it in terms of my original sort of use, as lots of people's was just around image generation and all that sort of stuff. I'm using, like, I love coming up with ideas and visualizing that. So there's all sorts of tools, even just, you're like, I just want to roughly see what this piece of video content would look like for 10 seconds. You can log on to polo.ai and it'll create it for you in 5 seconds. But also the brilliant thing with AI, especially as small agencies or boutique agencies, is it's democratized everything from skill and knowledge and the ability to do stuff from a cost perspective, right? So where if this had been coming around 10 or 15 years ago, the cost for everything was so high. If you wanted to implement a whole new operation system within your business or build something bespoke through tech or developers, it would have cost you so much money to do that, and it was just so prohibitive. So there was always this slight gap of, look at the skill set of big agencies and what they can offer, etc. It's fully democratized now. Like, the cost is a race to the bottom in a way. You can do so much yourself just with a bit of curiosity and a bit of research. So I think the smaller agency model and how different people will be operating their business as a small agency owner is so exciting. They'll look completely different in years to come. So, and it's happening very quickly. That's the one thing I'm really excited about with the AI experts that we've got coming through, our advisors. Is one of them, as Dave said, is looking at the systems and processes and looking at how we can make sure that we optimize that as much as we possibly can so people can focus on doing other stuff. But 2, for me, looking forward, is what are the services and things that we can offer clients that we're currently not doing? Like, one of the really interesting things I spoke about last week was synthetic audience. So I was like, well, what is this? Or synthetic profiles. And what they can start to do is say, cool, you've got a brief from an apparel brand or a drinks brand or whatever it might be. You can build out based on their brief that comes through. There's 3 different age demographics of the type of audience. We can come up with creative ideas, plug it through a synthetic profile and get some rough feedback on how they might respond to the idea. Like, this is phenomenal. It's like beta testing before we can do that. And that's happening within 5 minutes. So all of these tools and services that agencies are going to provide is going to be amazing.
I love that. I heard a story recently about a public affairs agency who have scraped loads and loads of data from different MPs, and MPs obviously love to talk. There's loads and loads of data to scrape anyway, and they created basically a digital twin of the whole of Parliament. And you can put out an idea or a policy, and you can see who's going to support it, who's going to be against it, and what are the points what are the points they're going to be against. And it's absolutely brilliant.
Just incredible for that, right? And in a way, for me, it's really going to help us start to show our clients around the real value and show that we're just getting a one step further up the planning cycle and getting more bedded into us understanding their business challenges. We can get way further up the planning model in my mind, because we can start to use those tools to show the impact we'll have on commercial, right? Ultimately, most of our clients are briefing us because they want to, on the whole, sell their product, get more visibility. So if we can start to understand their audience better and show the value around that, I think that's going to be amazing.
I can't wait to see what you guys get up to next. Got
Neither
great
can
ideas. Where can our listeners go to find out more about your business?
Pangolinpr.com is one of the good places to do it. And I mentioned earlier that we've got a social team here, so we're pretty active on Instagram at the moment, Pangolinsta, and obviously LinkedIn as well. Give us a follow there, Pangolin PR, because as we've got bigger, we've made a bit more time to actually market our business outside of actually just focusing on our clients. So that's really started to pick up, and we've got a very talented team that are pushing out some brilliant content. So come and check us out.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks so much.
Cheers.